Welcome to part 3 of a 4-part reading from what I would consider to be a philosophical and even spiritual masterpiece, Alan Watts' The Book. In the first 2 parts, he offers a whole new way of viewing our role in the universe and our relationship with everything in it. And then once he kind of shifts our whole perspective in this video, he does that magical Wattsy thing and says, okay, now that I've changed everything, so what? And he begins to frame a whole new challenge that we face, our inability to be happy or enjoy ourselves, and the devastating consequences of that for us, our communities, society, and the world as a whole. What I find really fascinating about this is he wrote this, 50 years ago, and it's still very relevant for us, and to understand why happiness, learning to enjoy our lives, gaining mental freedom from guilt, resentment, learning to be present and at peace with the way things are is such an urgent calling for us. So anyway, I hope you enjoy. Here we go. All right, so we'll delve into a little bit of the so what, because it's just so intriguing. And it's what Alan Watts does, right? He makes this great point and then goes, well, so what? I just shifted your entire view of the whole universe. And? So it says, to have spoken of a new vision is to be asked in the next breath what good it will do. When you come to think of it, this is astonishing, but is invariably true in speaking with people brought up in the environment of Protestantism, Catholics, Hindus, Buddhists, Muslims, and Taoists. Understand that vision or contemplation is good in itself, even the supreme good in the sense of the beatific vision. Beatific vision, where all beings are externally absorbed in the knowledge and love of God. But this possibility makes Protestants nervous, and one of their official prayers asks that those in heaven may be granted continual growth in thy love and service, because after all, you can't stop progress. Even heaven must be a growing community. The reason is, I suppose, the modern Protestantism in particular, in its liberal and progressive forms, is the religion most strongly influenced by the mythology of the world of objects and of man as a separate ego, which is fascinating because I feel like it should be the opposite. That's really what I was raised in, Bible Christianity, that likes to say it's non-denominational and just about a relationship, but there is this idea very much that things are just separate and objects. Man so defined and so experienced is, of course, incapable of pleasure and contentment, let alone creative power. Hoaxed into the illusion of being an independent, responsible source of actions, he cannot understand why what he does never comes up to what he should do. For a society which has defined him as a separate cannot persuade him to behave as if he really belonged. It's fascinating. I've lived that. Thus he feels chronic guilt and makes the most heroic efforts to placate his conscience. I've lived that too. From these efforts come social services, hospitals, peace movements, foreign aid programs, free education, and the whole philosophy of the welfare state. Yet we are bedeviled by the fact that the more these heroic and admirable enterprises succeed, the more they provoke new and increasingly horrendous problems. The problem of the social justice warrior. And it's funny because he's pointing at that this all has to do with a deep sense of guilt because we're not doing what we should be doing because we think we're independent agents that act when really there's this whole, we're part of a whole process that's happening. We're not independent at all. For one thing, few of us have ever thought through the problem of what good such enterprises are ultimately supposed to achieve. When we have fed the hungry, clothed the naked, and housed the homeless, what then? Is the object to enable unfortunate people to help those still more unfortunate? To convert Hindus and Africans into a huge bourgeoisie, where every Bengali and every Zulu has the privilege of joining our special rat race, buying appliances on time and a television set to keep him running? Some years ago, a friend of mine was walking through tea plantations near Darjeeling and noticed one particular group of fields where the bushes were all shriveled. On asking why, it was explained that the owner had felt so sorry for his impoverished workers that he had paid them double. But as a result, they turned up for work only half the time, which was disastrous in the critical season when the plants have to be tended every day. My friend put this problem to an Indian communist. His solution was to pay them double and compel them to work. He then put it to an American businessman. His solution was to pay them double and put radios in their homes. No one seemed to understand that these workers valued time for goofing off more than money. It is hard for compulsive activists to see that the vast social and economic problems of the world cannot be settled by mere effort and technique. The outsider cannot just barge in like Santa Claus and put things to right, especially our kind of outsider, who, because he has no sense of belonging in the world, invariably smells like an interferer. And it's interesting because I've heard about this over and over. I've been involved with groups that go to put water in a town in Africa, and the town actually gets angry with them. And they really had to reset and realize, and this is why we don't realize we're taking people's power by rescuing them, because it's being done out of our own guilt and looking for meaning is what he's getting at. And I always thought of it in the sense of a power game, and you're taking people's power away and they don't feel involved themselves, not getting to sort of this deep sense of guilt that we're looking to eliminate. It's just fantastic. He does not really know what he wants, and therefore everyone suspects that there are limitless strings attached to his gifts. For if you know what you want and will be content with it, you can be trusted. But if you do not know, your desires are limitless and no one can tell how to deal with you. It's so brilliant. Nothing satisfies an individual incapable of enjoyment. I'm not saying that American and European corporations are run by greedy villains who live off the fat of the land at everyone else's expense. The point becomes clear only as one realizes with compassion and sorrow that many of our most powerful and wealthy men are miserable dupes and captives in a treadmill who, with the rarest exception, have not the ghost of a notion how to spend and enjoy money. And I know that. I've met them, I've hung out with them, but I didn't have the words to put it like that. And then he has a poem. If I had been a heathen, I'd have praised the purple vine. My slaves would dig the vineyards and I would drink the wine. But Higgins is a heathen, and his slaves grow lean and gray, that he may drink some tepid milk exactly twice a day. So what our rich people do, right? We get weird, miserable. Well, I'm going to learn to enjoy myself with all my great gobs of money. Heads up. The startling truth is that our best efforts for civil rights, international peace, population control, conservation of natural resources, and assistance to the starving of the earth, urgent as they are, will destroy rather than help if made in the present spirit. Haven't we seen that? This was in the 70s. We're 50 years later now. And the level of destruction of our help is just becoming more and more apparent. For as things stand, we have nothing to give. If our own riches and our own way of life are not enjoyed here, they will not be enjoyed anywhere else. Certainly they will supply the immediate jolt of energy and hope that methadone and similar drugs give in extreme fatigue. But peace can be made only by those who are peaceful, and love can be shown only by those who love. And I was wondering why, our diversity movement is getting so weird and we're not actually getting any farther in our effort to accept and be diverse. And this is why. He's pointing at it, right? Like begets like, energy produces energy. So if you're doing things out of anger or vengeance, it just becomes about oppressing the other group. You're never going to get to equality because you would have to be peaceful and loving and feel like an equal where you are in order to treat other people that way. No work of love will flourish out of guilt, fear, or hollowness of heart, just as no valid plans for the future can be made by those who have no capacity for living now. And all of us have learned to live future-based. The separate person is without content in both senses of the world. He lives perpetually on hope, on looking forward to tomorrow, having been brought up this way from childhood, when his uncomprehending rage at double binds was propitiated with toys. Look at that. So we were told as kids, you just got to be this way because this is the way society is, but you're independent. But the more strict a family is, it's so funny, like you're saying, don't be part of the world, don't live how they're living. But the most strict force you to live how they're living, which is actually doing exactly what they're telling you not to do. And I know, coming from a strict environment, that's why I got so frustrated and angry. And it's so cool that he's here explaining it, justifying why that makes people so angry, right? It's a double bind. You're telling me not to conform, but forcing me to conform. And then I'm going to buy you off and bribe you with toys. We started back then. If you want to find a true folk religion in our culture, look at the rites of Santa Claus. And this is pretty hilarious, but he goes into the absolute ridiculousness of Christmas and how unsatisfying it is, basically. And it talks about leading up to Christmas and how exhausted we are with the shopping and the parties, and like we're almost done by the time vacation starts. And I'll just read this part. It says, when at last the day comes, Christmas Eve, or Christmas, the children are frantic, hardly able to wait for breakfast, and not having slept most of the night, they tear those gold and silver parcels to shreds, as if they contain nothing less than the elixir of life or the philosopher's stone. By noon, the living room looks as if a waste paper truck had crashed into a dime store, leaving a wreck of mangled cartons, Excelsior wrapping paper, and writhing ribbons. Neckties, upended dolls, half-assembled model railroads, spacesuits, plastic atomic bombs, and scattered chocolate bars. Hundreds of tinker toy pieces, crushed tree ornaments, miniature sports cars, water pistols, bottle of whiskey, and balloons. An hour later, the children are blubbering or screaming and have to be shooed out of doors while the mess is shoved together to make room for Christmas dinner. Thereafter, the 12 days of Christmas are spent with upset stomachs, colds, and influenza, and on New Year's Eve, the adults get stoned to forget the whole thing. That's the best evaluation of Christmas I've ever heard. Well, it was fun describing it, but the point is that intense expectation fizzled. The girl was gorgeous, but the guy was impotent. It's the best way of words. But since there must be something somewhere, expectation is kindled again to keep us all going for that golden, voluptuous goodie at the end of the line. What could it be? The children knew it well until they got caught up in the rat race. One of the best Christmas presents I ever had was a cheap ring with a glass diamond. It was quite incidental, something that came out of a snapper or cracker at a party. But I sat down in front of the fireplace with this enchanted object and turned it to catch the different colors of light which blazed inside. I knew that I had found the ring of Solomon, with which he summoned jinns and afrits with wings of brass. And it wasn't that I wanted them to do anything for me, for it was just enough to be in that atmosphere, to watch these magical beings come to life in the flames of the fire, and to feel that I was in touch with the timeless paradise world. Now it is symptomatic of our rusty beer can type of sanity that our culture produces very few magical objects. Jewelry is slick and uninteresting. Architecture is almost totally bereft of exuberance, obsessed with erecting glass boxes. Children's books are written by serious ladies with 3 names and no imagination. And as for comics, have you ever looked at the furniture in Dagwood's home? The potentially magical ceremonies of the Catholic Church are either gabbled away at top speed or rationalized with the aid of a commentator. Drama or ritual in everyday behavior is considered affectation in bad form, and manners have become indistinguishable from mannerisms, where they exist at all. We produce nothing comparable to the great Oriental carpets, Persian glass, tiles, and illuminated books, Arabian leatherwork, Spanish marquetry, Hindu textiles, Chinese porcelain and embroidery, Japanese lacquer and brocade, French tapestries, or Inca jewelry, though incidentally, he puts in parentheses, there are certain rather small electronic devices that come unwittingly close to fine jewels. The reason is not just that we are too much in a hurry and have no sense of the present, not just that we cannot afford the type of labor that such things would now involve, or just that we prefer money to materials. The reason is that we have scrubbed the world clean of magic. We have lost even the vision of paradise so that our artists and craftsmen can no longer discern its forms. This is the price that must be paid for attempting to control the world from the standpoint of an eye from whom everything that can be experienced is a foreign object and a nothing but. It would be sentimental and impossible to go back. Children are in touch with paradise to the extent that they have not fully learned the ego trick, and the same is true of cultures which by our standards are more primitive and by analogy childlike. If then, after understanding, at least in theory, that the ego trick is a hoax and that beneath everything I and universe are one, you ask, so what? What is the next step? The practical application? I will answer that the absolutely vital thing is to consolidate your understanding. to become capable of enjoyment, of living in the present, and of the discipline which this involves.